I'm Dr. Rawiri Waratini Karana, and this is Historical Intergenerational Trauma. In part 1 we looked at how trauma passes from one generation to the next, and it does through cellular memories. In part 2 we looked at how cellular memories can be passed to strangers, by organ donors to organ recipients. In part 3 we will be looking at the history of colonisation and how colonisation was established. This series focuses specifically on the Doctrine of Discovery. So this is the Doctrine of Discovery, legal justification of conquest. So when you think back to the age of discovery, European ambassadors, emissaries were going out into the indigenous lands, wanting to trade with the indigenous peoples. And when they got there, they found other European emissaries or ambassadors. And so what they realized is that to stop themselves fighting amongst each other, they had to create some guidelines. And it was about setting standards of practice when they engage with indigenous peoples and indigenous lands.
European descendants benefit from a violent history of land grabbing and genocide that was justified by patriotism and religion. This same theology formed an international legal structure that continues to dispossess indigenous peoples of their land. What does it mean to be a peacemaker today, in a world where the present is defined by the violence of the past?
In the simplest terms, the doctrine of discovery is the idea under international law that when a European Christian country was the first European to discover new lands, they had a legal right to that area.
The Doctrine of Discovery defined anybody who is not Christian as less than human and unworthy of land ownership.
The Doctrine of Discovery, as practiced, is evil. It provided that only those who know Christ are to be the chosen people. And it indicated that those who did not know Christ, who were not baptized, were heathens and had no souls and were animals. As a result of that, those heathens and animals could not own, possess, manage, or use their own indigenous lands.
There is no question that religion was a major part of the Doctrine of Discovery and justification from the European viewpoint as to why they were predominant and dominant, and God intended for European Christians to have the whole world.
What it was about giving them a sense of legality to their actions. But for them to get that type of legality, they needed the sanction of the Catholic Church. At their request of the European monarchies, they sent out what they call Papal decrees. So Papal decrees are declarations of the Pope. So this is Romanus Pontifex 1455. Called for non-Christian peoples to be invaded, captured, vanquished, subdued, and reduced to perpetual slavery, and to have their possessions and property seized by Christian monarchs.
And in the famous or infamous papal bulls in 1452 and in 1455, the Pope orders Portugal to invade, subdue the Saracen, and which was their word for Muslim, and the pagan of any of whatsoever, take their property, take their lives, govern them, rule them, take. The popes created these papal bulls and started this development of the Doctrine of Discovery. But this was not a Catholic Church-specific movement. The idea of acquiring the lands and rights of indigenous peoples was very much just a European idea, and maybe greed. Let's say the word outright.
I think we always wondered why did they think it was right or just to do what What they did was, to take our lands and to push us off our lands and try to eliminate us as a people. And then we discovered this doctrine of discovery, and it just kind of made things understandable as to where they got their direction from.
When Columbus landed, and he went back, and he reported, and they said then, the leaders, and the Vatican was the most powerful voice in the world at that time. A papal bull, 1493, 1 year later. If there are no Christian nations in this new land you have discovered, I declare those lands to be empty. Terra nullius, a very old Roman law that had been exercised in Africa, India, Europe. Further, if there are people there and they are not Christians, they do not have a right of title to land. They have only the right of occupancy. From our perspective, the same right as a rabbit running on the ground, or a turkey, or a deer, or a buffalo, or an Indian. They do not have a right of title to land. 1823, Supreme Court Justice John Marshall adjudicating the case Johnson versus McIntosh. Two white men arguing over Ohio Indian land. He says, "You boys have it all wrong. Don't you understand? This was settled long ago. They don't have a right of title to land." And he moved that principle into U.S. federal law, 1823.
A better way of life.
Better than what?
Better than what you have.
I like what I have.
I understand that. But your people live in the Stone Age. We live at the beginning of a great industrial revolution.
He doesn't understand why
Chief, the United States government is offering you a piece of land of your own.
We have our own land.
No, it's not yours. It's the U.S. government's.
Did they buy it?
No.
Did they trade for it?
It's not like that.
Then how can they own it?
he has a point.
These are all European powers, and it highlights which countries they colonised. Now, if you look at Great Britain, they're in the pink. What it very clearly highlights is that they colonised more countries than any other European power in the world. The Doctrine of Discovery is the founding element behind all laws in New Zealand, and it all stems from canon law from the Vatican. So we're going to look at some of the impacts of the Doctrine of Discovery on the Indigenous peoples. So we know that 1492, Christopher Columbus, on behalf of Spain, enslaves the Arab people, or the Taino people. He committed them to slavery to dig for gold. By 1555, their whole nation became extinct. The impact of the Doctrine of Discovery has its ripple effects that still impact today. From Christopher Columbus and the annihilation of the Taino people, to the running out of slaves and then going and starting the slave trade industry in Africa. It also brings to the fore a 500-year war which saw the genocide of 100 million native peoples. The genocide of 50 million South American peoples, the genocide of 20 million native Australians. And this practice of colonization began to pervade right around the world based on the impact of the Doctrine of Discovery.